Hello. Welcome to another episode of Modern Western Buddhism. My name is Jared Jones, and today we're going to be covering the same topic that we've been covering for the last month, which is staying motivated for meditation. I know that I'm not the only one among us that finds it difficult to sit down and maintain consistency in whatever level of training that you've decided to take on. This is an extremely common kind of thing. No matter what level your training advances to, you will still feel lazy about certain aspects of it. You will still not want to do certain parts of it. You will still want to cut certain parts short, or sort of, to borrow the sort of Pali version of this, that you'll only do it half-heartedly if you maintain the whole duration of whatever commitment you've made. I'm sure there are many of you who have done some type of extensive contemplation practice or a series of meditative steps that you're supposed to go through to combat something like anger or attachment or lust or whatever it is. And you get like 25% of the way through and you get kind of bored, and then you just kind of rush the rest of it. So this is actually part of what we're trying to address in this part of the series as well. If your motivation and intention are properly organized, properly set up, properly cultivated and maintained, then there's less tendency over the long haul to either skip the training entirely, or to cut the training short, or to maintain the full commitment that you've made, but to do it in a half-ass, half-committed, sort of half-engaged way. So in between this week and last week, I asked a few different groups if there were any questions. And one of the questions that I got was, how do you handle strong emotions coming up during meditation? And this is actually a great question for this week's subject. This week we're going to be covering the Lamrim approach to developing proper motivation and intention. And basically the Lamrim approach prepares the mind. It prepares the soil of the mind, if you will, if we're using a gardening or a farming analogy, to grow the crop of meditative concentration and the realizations that can be gained beyond simply being able to put the mind where you want it, when you want it, for as long as you want it. So in a bigger context, how do you deal with all these emotions that can spring up in the midst of a particular session of training and concentration? Well, in general, there's a lot of work you need to do before you get to the cushion over a long period, studying for a couple of years, understanding all the antidotes to particular emotions, maybe even cultivating the antidotes to your biggest emotional problems. For example, if you're a very angry person, extremely easily annoyed and prone to scream and yell or throw things as soon as anything goes wrong, or if you're extremely impatient and you have the type of personality where you're like, no, I'm a really capable person. As soon as I put my mind to something, I should be able to do it right away. And you just get really frustrated if you can't get it done within like a couple months, or maybe a couple weeks, or maybe a couple days, depending on how impatient you are. And for a lot of people, that comes from pride, right? And for some people, it comes from the type of laziness that we discussed before, which is disheartenment, right? You, in part, probably because of your pride, you think, because I'm special, because I'm great, because I'm so capable, unlike all the great yogis of the past, I should be able to do this in like 4 days. And if I can't do it in that period of time, then it's just not for me, right? It's not for me. I tried it, I sat there, tried to follow my breath, and it didn't work. Okay. So the big problems that you have emotionally will pop up on your cushion, and those really need to be handled either in a conventional way, if you have some type of mental disorder that is chemical, like I have some friends and family members who have bipolar disorder, for example. Buddhism is really not designed to handle that kind of problem in a short-term picture, right? For the rest of this lifetime, you're going to have this chemical imbalance. And Western therapy, Western medication can help to even out chemically what is wrong with your brain that causes you to go from a state of extreme excitement to a state of extreme depression. And simply sitting down and looking at the problem and trying to concentrate the mind and put it in some place isn't actually going to fix that chemical problem, probably for the rest of this lifetime. And this is coming from almost 20 years of watching people struggle with this stuff. So you may think, oh yeah, but eventually you could do it. Maybe. But if that's possible, then it's probably like 30 or 40 years down the line in terms of rigorous self-honesty training, slowly working with your doctor to get off medication, etc. So use the conventional tools. If you have a bad relationship with your husband or wife, go to couples therapy. If you're having trouble with your kids, read some parenting books and figure out, how do I communicate better? How do I solve this? Blah, blah, blah. Conventionally get some of your stuff together in your life, right? Because most of our strong emotions are coming up because we're thinking about some thing that occurred in the past that triggers whatever our main issue is or main issues are, whether that's arrogance or it's anger or it's jealousy, you name it. So that was the question from last week. And again, I think that question will be more thoroughly answered by today's topic. Last week, we covered Maitreya's approach to developing proper motivation and intention. And this aligns much more closely, I think, with sort of a standard Pali Canon Theravada way of sort of getting into the issues. That being said, if you look at the structure, for example, of Thai forest monastic life, you'll find that they do a lot of recitation of sutras. They do quite a bit of sort of study and discussion with their teachers. Yes, there's an emphasis on seated practice and sort of expanding the circles of mindfulness into a whole host of activities, both through using guidelines like how to eat properly and through more generalized techniques like, well, what do you do with your attention when you're walking, that sort of thing. But generally, the technique is this, right? Generally, and this isn't exclusive, right? You can do this in addition to thinking about all the benefits of meditation, as we discussed from Kamalashila using Lama Yeshe's text. So these aren't exclusive. And the Lamrim approach actually encompasses Kamalashila, but that won't be in today's topic. We've already covered that. So what did Maitreya have to say? He said that if you want to know the truth of suffering, that it correlates most strongly with mindfulness of the body. And we looked quite a bit at what mindfulness of the body consists in, right? And it's not simply just becoming aware that you have a physical body and, here's my left arm, here's my right arm, like it's not just sort of like the general mindfulness of like, get into your body, you're in your body now. That is not what we're talking about. Specifically, the most important element is contemplating the ongoing process of change of the body and, importantly, what happens to the body after you die. So this was his big advice. You need to become acutely aware, in particular, that this body is subject to being harmed and to be dying at any moment. And that after death, this body is going to go through this somewhat extended process of putrefying and falling apart and being eaten by bugs and animals and turning into a pile of bones and then basically disintegrating and being absorbed into other things to the point where there's none of you left at a physical level whatsoever. So that was his first point. Secondly, if you want to understand the truth of the cause of suffering, this correlates to the mindfulness of feelings. And these are feelings in the sense of not emotions, but feelings in the sense of when you have any experience of the five senses, right? Seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, that each one of those sensations, in the philosophical sense, a sensation that appears before your mind, is experienced in the next moment as either being pleasant, wanted, right, or unpleasant, unwanted, painful. And so there are these two options, or it's experienced as completely neutral. It's not pleasant, it's not unpleasant, it's not wanted, it's not unwanted, it's not painful, it's not comfortable. It's just neutral, right? And he says that if you want to understand the truth of the cause of suffering, that you need to look very, very, very closely at these direct sort of experiences of, oh, here's a pleasurable thing, I want that. Here's an unpleasurable or painful thing, I don't want that. And it's this process of craving, which is actually the driving force of aging, sickness, and death, rebirth, samsara. Yes? So the third point that he makes is if you want to understand the truth of cessation, you need to understand the mindfulness of mind from direct experience, right? So by looking at your mind, you understand that from these sensations of pleasure, for example, right? Attachment arises. You see the pleasure as having qualities that it doesn't have. That's attachment. In particular, you see pleasurable sensations, desirable or pleasant or nice sensations of the five senses as somehow being able to satisfy you at a fundamental level. You think, oh, if I could just twist all the knobs and flip all the switches in the right way so that I could get rid of the stuff I don't like and always be surrounded by the stuff I do like, I'd finally feel fulfilled, satisfied, happy, safe, secure. And that's bullshit. There's a reason that millionaires who, if they so chose, can control basically everything about their environment, often kill themselves. It's not that being rich will make you miserable. I know plenty of rich people that are very happy. I know some rich people that are much happier than poor people. I know some poor people that are much happier than some of the rich people I've met. The spectrum of human happiness in the conventional sense actually has nothing to do with wealth or poverty. But that's for another day. In any case, through looking at the mind, and in particular gaining a sense of what the mind actually is, it becomes clear that the mind is adding something to our perception, right? It's adding qualities to reality that reality doesn't have. And that those qualities that are being added to reality interfere with our interaction with reality as it actually is. And because we're adding these things, and in particular we're adding something called ignorance, we're adding something called avidya or avidya. It may be better translated actually not as ignorance, which generally people think of as just not knowing something, but rather misknowing. This is avidya, the opposite of knowing. In other words, the opposite of seeing things as they are. And we could go into great depth about this, but really this is sort of bridging into the emptiness and selflessness discussion, and that's not the purpose of this series. In any case, we see ourself as being absolutely unchanging, independent, and unchanging, independent, and unitary. There's just one of me. I am what I am, and I will always be that way. Yeah, we feel this way about ourselves. This is my coffee cup. It's the same coffee cup that I've been drinking out of for a year. There's basically nothing different about it except for a couple scratches. It's a coffee cup. Nobody can tell me any different, right? And if you do, it's because you're stupid. Not only is it a coffee cup, it's a nice coffee cup. Yeah, it's a beautiful, wonderful coffee cup. It's so nice. If it gets broken, I'm going to be so upset. If I could get 100 more like it, I'd be so happy. So this process of adding properties to reality that aren't there is what triggers what we would call in Buddhist psychology delusion. And delusion can be translated all sorts of ways. The real word is klesha. It can be translated so many ways. But it's basically mental and emotional activity that are triggered by things your mind added to reality, right? These negative emotions are the driving force that keeps you stuck in this cycle of suffering. Fortunately, because you're just making it up, they can be removed. And when you see for sure, oh wow, I'm making all that up, you know, I don't have to take it on faith, not just because the Buddha said so or something. I'm looking at it, and I just made some shit up, and now I'm feeling emotions about it, right? I'm not feeling emotions about what's actually going on. I'm feeling emotions about the crap I just made up. So then you go, oh wow, if I would just stop making shit up, then the suffering would go away, right? This is a little bit rough, but you get the idea. Then Maitreya says, okay, the final thing is the truth of the path. And this is discerned in the process of doing mindfulness on mental phenomena. So you go through an extended process of looking at each of the layers of mind, each of the layers of the delusions, each of the layers of the process of getting rid of the delusions step by step, stage by stage. And as you gain experience of each one of these, you go, oh, like, for example, I'm sure that most everyone has had an experience where you look back on something that you were so fired up about as a young person. Maybe even you based like a huge part of your identity on it. And you look back on it now and you just laugh and you go, wow, I can't believe that I thought that was the thing. I can't believe I thought that was true. It's so obviously not true, right? And at some point in your life, there was a moment where it clicked and you went, whoa, that's not true. And I've based so much of my actions on it, so much of my life, so much of my emotional drive, right? And this process is almost exactly the same way. This is not a mystical thing. This is not like Abrahamic mysticism, where a deity is bestowing you with some solitary experience and then bang, it's done. I'm free now. That's not what this is. This is much more down to earth. You see that, oh, wow, this raga thing, attachment, it's really just me making up a bunch of shit about the objects in my environment and myself. I can see that directly in my experience by looking directly at the mind and the components and what the mind is busy doing when I'm not paying attention. Wow, if I could stop making that shit up, I'd be a lot happier. Because the attachment is causing all sorts of negative behavior. The attachment is causing me to chase after a bunch of things that I don't need. It's causing me to lie to people. It's causing me to speak harshly. It's causing me to create division between people. Like how many love stories and blah, blah, blah have you seen on television, you've seen in movies, or even amongst your friends, where people hatch these elaborate schemes because they think, oh, if I can just be with this person, I'll be happy. And they hatch these elaborate schemes to divide them from some other person, right? And so because we're adding properties to reality that aren't there, we put ourselves through the ringer. And when you see that this is what you're doing, you go, oh, wow, I need to stop doing that. And with a little bit of advice from the wise, which is what everyone always misses from that famous sutra where the Buddha is basically laying out his skeptical manifesto. If you read that passage, and at some point we will, where he's saying, don't rely on tradition, don't rely on this, don't rely on that, he says, basically you need to come to the same conclusions that the wise came to in the end. Those things that are praised by the wise. How do you do that? Well, you do that by listening to the wise. Not by like making up a bunch of shit and going your own way, actually. Okay, I digress. So, where are we? So in any case, through listening, for example, to the teachings on the stages of gaining arhatship, the stages of gaining full nirvana, or the stages on gaining Buddhahood, the stages of a bodhisattva, a being striving for enlightenment. And these two have significant overlaps, right? You need to attain nirvana to eventually attain full awakening. So there's a lot of overlaps. But through listening to these teachings, you can then analyze your own experience at each stage as you progress. And you can go, oh, yes, I'm here now. I see, yes, it's exactly like it was described. And here's what they say the next problem is. Oh, wow, yeah, I see that problem. There it is. Wow, yes, it's exactly like they described. Okay, here's the 3 things I need to do for the antidote. Boom, 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 boom. Right? So this is through looking at mental phenomenon, looking at these phenomenon in your mind as they arise with the help of the wise. You start to progress along the path and understand really what the path actually is. So in summary, that is Maitreya's approach. And you can probably see how that aligns quite nicely with just first gaining a really, really powerful motivation, like your hair or your clothing is on fire, says the Buddha. A motivation is so strong to train in meditative concentration, right? Each one of these little experiences that you gain in doing different types of analysis and looking at different aspects of who and what you are adds to that motivation, right? So these two coincide. All right, so on to today's topic. Let me transition over. All right. So let me make this bigger for the sake of everyone at home. Okay. So the first question is, what is Lam Rim? You've heard me say this in a bunch of videos up until here, and I apologize because I was originally, I don't know, just sort of making these videos for a couple of people for whom I thought I could explain a lot of the details. And as time's gone on, more and more people have shown interest, and so the text has needed to take on a different character. So, what is the Lam Rim approach to gaining proper motivation and intention to train in meditative concentration? Okay. First question is, what is Lam Rim? Lam Rim means stages of the path. It is a Tibetan word. Oh, don't need to do that, whatever that was. It is a Tibetan word. And generally speaking, Lam Rim is a systematic, sequential series of training steps that takes a brand new, green, completely uninitiated novice person who's never done a single bit of mind training in their life, maybe even in the history of their mental continuum, right? And gives them every single critical point along the path to be able to make it all the way to the end. So it is quite literally a beginning to end causal sequence of steps to realize all of the components of the path. This is, I think, if not the most brilliant arrangement of Buddha Dharma ever invented, it is among the most brilliant arrangements of Buddha Dharma ever invented, just in my opinion. So Lamrim texts are found among all of the major Tibetan lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. The original Lamrim text, although we could have some debate about this, because I think things like The Path of Purification by Venerable Buddhaghosa is basically a Lamrim text, but I digress. Venerable Atisha wrote A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment at the request of some Tibetans. The Tibetans said, hey, when you read the sutras, I mean, there are just so many teachings. And the Buddha was teaching sometimes to a general audience with sort of a general instruction, and sometimes to a specific person with a specific instruction for that person, or to a specific group for that group. And so some of his teachings are sort of, how do we say, don't need any interpretation. They are straightforward. Here's what I'm saying. Here's what I mean. You don't need any extra context for this. And then there are some that need interpretation, right? Meaning you need to understand the context of this for this to be a meaningful teaching. So the Tibetans asked Venerable Atisha, hey, can you give us a general outline of the teachings, a soup to nuts, beginning to end, cause and effect? Here is the entire path teaching. And so Venerable Atisha, after some thought, wrote A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, which is a short text. You could read it in a single sitting, that encompasses all of the major steps of the Buddhist path to enlightenment. Now, the one step that he does not cover in that text, but is covered elsewhere by him, is the preciousness of a human rebirth, which we will cover today. That's quite interesting that he doesn't cover it in this particular text also, because when you look at some of the writings of his students, you find that his students talk about this as though it was already an established thing, if you catch my meaning. It's just strange that his students would, for example, talk about the freedoms and fortunes, which is sort of the language of talking about the precious human rebirth in the old Kadam tradition. Even though I've never seen sort of a complete teaching from Atisha on this, and he doesn't have it in The Lamp for the Path. But once again, maybe not so important. So Venerable Atisha is an extremely important teacher. I'd recommend, if you have the time at some point, to read his biography, which I have linked in the notes here. There's a wonderful resource called Treasury of Lives. Treasury of Lives. And they have a huge number of short biographies for free on the web about the great masters from the past, especially in the Indian and Tibetan traditions. So you're welcome to look that up, even if you're not following along in the notes. So what is the Lamrim style text that we're going to cover today? So Je Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelug tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, wrote many Lamrim texts. He wrote the middle-length treatise on the stages of the path, of which we now have a translation as of last year. Hallelujah. And I hope somebody laughed at me saying hallelujah. And the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment is actually 3 volumes. And I want to give you a reference point here because it's not well communicated simply via text, right? But when you look at his Lamrims, this is the middle-length Lamrim. That's the whole text, yeah? This is the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise. So you can see there's much more content here. It covers the same material, but the middle length is much more brief. Then when you start talking about, well, what is the scholarly commentary on the Chenmo? Well, first of all, there are multiple commentaries on the Chenmo, but there's one in English. There's one sort of fully complete commentary of the Chenmo in English, and that's it. So, when I say that it is sort of a voluminous set of instructions that covers the path from beginning to end in exhaustive detail, covering all of the critical points without leaving anything out, I'm not exaggerating. It's like reading an encyclopedia for the training of Buddhist mind training. Absolutely exceptional. I mean, among the greatest works of religious literature ever produced. It's much more like reading a sort of like a technical manual on, I don't know, how to put a stereo together than it is reading a religious text. It's utterly practical, utterly practical. You do this, this happens. Then you have these 4 problems. These 4 problems can be broken down into 6 categories. These 6 categories are blah, 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 blah. I mean, it is so crystal clear. If you'd like to read Je Tsongkhapa's shortest Lamrim, it has a couple different monikers in English. The Songs of Spiritual Experience is one. I don't really like that particular way of describing this text, but it could be called the condensed points of the stages of the path. I have a link here. You're welcome to read that. It's quite excellent. Now, he has an even shorter expression of this teaching, which doesn't have all of the explanations, right? Not even close. And it summarizes some things and kind of funnels them into other things without making clear all the different points that need to be thought of and so on. And this, I believe, was at the request, I may be wrong, fairly certain this was at the request of a student of his who's basically said, can you help me kind of boil all this down into something short, really, really short, that I can do every day and think about every day. And so he wrote him a letter and said, here's the foundation of all good qualities, right? So this text really captures in some way the essence of all of the Lamrim teachings. However, by itself, it is not sufficient, actually, to understand all the steps and stages. So, if you've already done a lot of study on Lamrim and you've read quite a bit, you know what the steps and stages are, reading this text will trigger all of those understandings. Boom, 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 boom. So you can use it almost like an outline to do either a reviewing meditation, which you may recall is like looking at a map or looking at a landscape from far away, where you just kind of review all the information to keep it fresh in your mind, or to do a rumination. So you can use the points here to go, okay, here's point 1, boom, 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 boom. There's the realization. You generate that, hold that realization for a period of time, move on to point 2, blah, blah, blah. So that's what this text is designed for. So in my mind, it's sort of a wonderful snapshot of both sort of the essence of the ancient Indian tradition of Buddhism at the pinnacle of ancient Indian Buddhism, because ancient Indian Buddhism got wiped out in the, I think, 1150s or 1200s, and Venerable Atisha was writing this basically right then, right? So this is the pinnacle of those teachings being transferred to Tibet, and then being commented on after 200 or 300 years of Tibetans thinking about these teachings by one of the greatest living Tibetan yogis. He spent 4 years in a cave and did a number of other retreats, Je Tsongkhapa. And, of course, Je Tsongkhapa was also an astonishing scholar, right? So you have the meditative side covered by both of these gentlemen, and you have the scholarly side covered by both of these gentlemen. So really extraordinary opportunity. Okay, I hope I've done a good job explaining who these gentlemen are in brief. Without further ado, here is the text. The foundation of all good qualities. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and venerable Guru. Correct devotion to the Guru is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. As we've discussed many times, we could probably substitute the word guru in English with mentor, right? So mentorship is the root of the path. Mentorship is the root of the path. Why? If you were going to climb Mount Everest and you bought a manual on climbing the mountain, but you've never done any mountaineering before, and this book was written by someone who had summited every major peak on the planet. They had summited Mount Everest several times. And you read this book cover to cover. What do you think the odds are that even if you packed this book in your backpack, that you would survive the climb up Mount Everest by just reading that book? I mean, if there's some part of you that goes, oh yeah, I could really make it, I could really do that, I just need the instruction manual, I think you're crazy. Genuinely. Seek help. The thing is that when you turn your mind inward, all sorts of weird things happen. And the potential for self-deception is absolutely extraordinary. So you don't only need a good map to the top of the mountain, you need a guide. You need a Sherpa, right? You need someone who lives on the mountain, who's climbed it multiple times, who's discussed things with other climbers for years and years and years. An experienced person who has traversed this path in its entirety or has gotten way further than you have to help you apply these general instructions to the specific conditions you find on the mountain, right? So that as you're standing there reading the instruction manual with like 10 degree below zero weather and 100-mile-an-hour winds, I mean, just thinking about it is hilarious, isn't it? No, you need someone to go, oh yeah, when the clouds get like this and there's basically a monsoon of destruction coming in that's going to turn us into popsicles, that's the time to actually set up camp before we get killed, right? That's not a piece of instruction that you want to forget. And you want to be able to set things up properly. You want to know what location in that specific area to set your camp up in, because the Sherpa knows where the snow tends to form avalanches and where it doesn't, blah, 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 right? So having an experienced person to mentor you and to give you guidance specific to where you are at different times is absolutely essential. If you want to make real progress, everyone that I know who's made genuine progress in any Eastern system had good teachers who gave them general instructions and good mentors who gave them personalized pith instructions at various stages of their training, right? And those are two different things. So the mentor, the kind, venerable mentor, the mentor who is venerable because they have more qualities than you, more experience than you, and kind because they don't just keep those to themselves. They help you out by giving you exactly what you need when you need it. Yeah. Please bless me to rely upon the Guru, rely upon the mentor with great respect. Because if you don't have respect for this person, or rather to put it the other way, to the degree that you do not respect this person, it is exactly by that degree that you reduce the benefit you get from them. It's almost like you're a hose with a bunch of kinks in it, right? And the more kinks, the less water can flow through. If you're a completely clean, smooth conduit, then what the guru, mentor, whatever tells you is what you accomplish, period. And so there's no friction, nothing. This is why relying on the mentor can be so powerful. It's also why it can be so scary, because if your mentor is actually just a charlatan and you're a completely smooth conduit, man, you're going to get taken for a ride. So there's a lot of advice, and we can go over that at some point on how to assess a teacher. and what to look for and how you know. But the general advice is you need to take a really long time before you decide that someone is your mentor, your guru. You need to take a really long time. They recommend somewhere between 4 and 7 years of investigation of their character. So no hurry. Topic number 2, after relying on the mentor properly, is understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful, and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. Yes. Okay. I think that's an error. Yeah, that's got to be that. Okay. So, what does this mean? If you study the Lam Rim properly, the first proper subject of meditation that is actually generating one of the 3 principal paths. The 3 principal paths being renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. Yeah, and we can talk about that at some length as time goes on. But the first teaching that's actually starting to generate one of the paths that is a path out of samsara is this one, right? You do need to be able to rely on the mentor properly, but the first thing that starts to actually get you out of samsara is this topic. So this precious human rebirth is found only once, is extremely difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful. So these points are summarizing a much more elaborate explanation. And the Lam Rim is actually quite sparse on these points because intellectually it's not demanding, but emotionally this is an extremely demanding teaching. Look what he says here. Bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. So what you're asking for here is that you contemplate this topic and become so convinced, so deeply moved, that whether you're awake or you're asleep, that your mind is constantly infused with this motivation. It's never absent. Unceasing. Never absent. This is quite a powerful motivation. Anyone who's had something really terrible happen in their life knows that this type of mental change is possible. Anyone who's lost a dear child, a dear husband, a dear friend, these losses, for example, you experience while you're awake, while you're asleep. You experience them all the time. That, oh, that person's gone now. And it stays with you for months when you're really, really close, right? So the motivation that we're trying to generate here is of that caliber, of that intensity, of that sort of duration and staying power. It's as though you are constantly in grief in terms of its profundity. Of course, you're not in grief. This is actually a state of joy. You're going, wow, this human rebirth with these qualities is so rare. Because most beings, according to Buddhism, are born in extreme pain and suffering in the lower realms. Or they're born in extreme confusion with very few resources in the lower realms. Or they're born with extreme stupidity and sort of instinctual habit in the animal realms, right? Or they're born in the human realm but they're born at a time when the Buddha's teachings didn't appear. Or they're born at a time when the Buddha's teachings appeared, but they're born somewhere that they never hear the word nirvana. They never hear the word Buddha. They never hear the words Four Noble Truths, etc. Right? Or they're born in a place where they hear those things, but because of some type of mental or physical obstruction, right? Like the body doesn't function properly, or their mind doesn't function properly. They have some type of mental disorder. They can't put what they heard into practice and make very much progress. Or they have a body and mind that function reasonably well, but they have already used that mind to accumulate some other set of philosophical or religious viewpoints. And so they are completely impenetrable in terms of getting this information. So they're already a devout Muslim, or they're already a devout Catholic, or they're already a devout whatever. Or they're a staunch materialist atheist. Or they are you get the point. So these would all be considered wrong views according to the Buddhist system. So the view that there is an ultimate creator God is a wrong view. It's a viewpoint that will obstruct the process of training in the long run. Or the view that the material world is all that exists. This is a view that will obstruct the training process in the long run. So luckily, hopefully, some of us don't have these views established in our mind in a way that is so strong that we are absolutely not interested in Buddhism at all. And we're not interested in training the mind. Why would I be? There's a big God up there, and as long as I'm kind of nice and I believe in that God, I'm good. I'm going to heaven. Good. Or, there's no gods, there's no deities, there's no rebirth, there's no karma. There's no such thing as omniscient Buddhas. There's no such thing as arhats in nirvana after death, because we're just atoms. We're just atoms, and your brain is just material stuff. And when you die, you're gone. Done. Right? To paraphrase Epicurus, there was a long time before you existed. After you die, there's going to be a long time where you don't exist. So most of the time, you don't exist. There's just a brief time where you do. And other than that, right? So these viewpoints are prolific. They're everywhere. You weren't, if you're watching this video, probably weren't so deeply ingrained with one of these views that you weren't interested in this topic. Right? So that opportunity, this opportunity with all of these conditions coming together, where you have an interest in this, where there are still good teachers and teachings around, where there are still realized beings around, where there are still valid lineages of the teachings around that people are gaining realization in, and so on. Extremely rare. It's so rare, it's absurd. The analogies they use are absolutely absurd. So why are we discussing this again? We're discussing this because you need to develop powerful motives that get your butt on the cushion again and again and again. And the Lamrim approach says one of the first things you need to do is realize that this opportunity is rare and that it's meaningful, right? So we just discussed that it's kind of rare, right? But it's meaningful. Meaningful how? With this particular human rebirth, you can, if you so choose, just do a lot of good deeds. You can practice good deeds and you can avoid negative deeds, and you can gain another rebirth like this one. So if you're generous and you're ethical in terms of the 10 virtuous and non-virtuous deeds, and if you practice patience, and if you practice joyous effort, right? Perseverance, in other words, then your next rebirth is going to be fantastic. Right? You have all the components you need. Generosity gives you the material resources that you might want, and the ethics gives you another human body, and the patience gives you nice friends and lovers and all of this, and good teachers, and the perseverance gives you the gusto, the balls, the cojones, the whatever it is, to see any activity that you start through to the end, period, right? So it's going to be a good life. You can also attain a higher rebirth. You can attain rebirth as a deity. If you practice concentrations, the form realm concentrations, you can take rebirth in one of the form realm heavens, right? So where your body is basically made, almost like if you visualize an apple in your mind right now, right? You visualize an apple that has a little white dot on it because it's being lit from somewhere. It's red, it has a green leaf and a brown stem. There it is, right? So in your mind, you see this form. So in the form realm, all forms are more like this mental image. They're not made of physical stuff. As soon as your mind sort of conceives of them, they occur. Your mind is extraordinarily under control, so the things that occur are fucking amazing, right? Like you visualize bliss nectar, and a goblet of bliss nectar appears and you drink it, and it's amazing. And your friends are great, and things are harmonious because everybody has concentrated bliss whenever they want, etc., etc. If you want to go further than this, because there are problems in the form realm, well, you can do that too. You can go to the formless realms, where you don't have a body, you're pure consciousness, and your mind is extremely subtle and disciplined, and experiences unbelievable, just astonishing states of bliss and freedom from disturbing states of mind, right? So this is beyond visualizing stuff. This is further. If you so choose, you can also go beyond simply entering some type of extremely peaceful, formless state, and you can remove the causes of suffering forever and enter a state of nirvana, which is absolutely perfect for your needs, right? If you so choose, following the examples of great masters like Milarepa, Marpa, Gampopa, the Buddha himself, you can attain samyak sambodhi, unexcelled, unsurpassed, full awakening, which, according to various Buddhist schools, means that you become omniscient and that you have the capability to emanate or appear to other sentient beings in a way that is beneficial to those beings. So not only can you nirvanize your state of perception, meaning that you attain an internal state that's perfect for you, but you can then, on top of that, develop a mind that knows, at a minimum, everything it needs to know to be of benefit to others, and has the capability to act on that knowledge perfectly, without error. Wow. Yeah. And of course, a lot of discussion, so much discussion needs to be had to justify each of these positions. In particular, I hope this explains why I spent some time in the beginning talking about what is mind. Why is it reasonable to think that mind is non-physical? And therefore, why is it reasonable to think that mind is reborn in multiple lives and so on? Why is it therefore reasonable to think that mind could know things non-locally? All of these issues are extremely important if you want to intellectually get at nirvana and Buddhahood, and frankly, the form and formless realms, and the entirety of Buddhist cosmology. If you want to get at these things intellectually, so that you can develop the powerful motivation that Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about here to get your butt to the cushion, then you first need to have conviction that the mind is non-physical. And so if you go back to the mind section I believe that I put a link there. I don't know that I had it previously, but I put a link there to a document where I have, I don't know, 150 pages of the best scientific and philosophical evidence that the mind is non-physical, including 2 exercises you can do at home to actually look at your mind and see what it looks like from a first-person perspective. So, highly recommend that. Now, not only is it greatly meaningful, but it's difficult to find again, right? So it's rare in the first place. It's rare to have one. It's greatly meaningful because you can accomplish any favorable outcome in the entirety of the universe. Any favorable outcome you'd like, you can create it through your behavior now. And it's really hard to find again. This is a bit of a tough point. This is a bit of a tough point. So once again, for those who are not super keen on the karma thing and the Buddhist cosmology thing and the non-physical mind thing, I apologize. But this must be said anyway, and I'll say that I'm in the ballpark of like 95%, maybe 97, 98% on a good day, convinced that this is correct. What I'm waiting for is just a little bit of the direct meditative experience that allows you to actually see these things, right? So that it's not simply an extremely reasonable set of arguments predicated from the experience of great meditators the world over, not just Buddhist meditators, but even Sufis and practitioners of Kabbalah, right, report these kinds of things. Which is really weird when you think about it, because rebirth is not part of Jewish nor Muslim theology in a strict sort of manner. So difficult to find again. Why? So the Buddha makes this argument. This argument is reformulated by the Tibetans in numerous ways, but I'm going to give you this one, right? Every day I look out my window and I see the horses here on the pasture next to me. These horses wake up at, 5 or 6 in the morning, and they start eating grass. And they eat grass basically all day, taking a nap occasionally. And they stop eating grass sometime around 12 o'clock in the evening. So for whatever that is, 18 hours a day, they basically just eat. Now, in between those moments are intense moments of fear, where something happens and they're just terrified. In between those moments are experiences of jealousy, where one of the horses goes to take a drink and the other one's like, "No, that's my water." And they jump in and they try to like butt the other horse out and bite them, or throw a tantrum and start kicking and whatever. So all day long, all these horses are doing is following attachment, right? There's, oh, I'm going to eat this great thing, and oh, why does he have a better thing than me? Go over there, and I'm going to take that patch of grass is mine now. You get out of here. That water is mine now. So chasing jealousy or envy, chasing anger, right? So sometimes there's one female horse on the pasture, and sometimes she flirts with one of the horses, and the other horse will get mad. So all day long, these horses are chasing attachment, aversion, jealousy. According to Buddhist karmic theory, this means that all day long, 18 hours a day, these horses are accumulating further negative karma. So the only possible result, basically, unless something extraordinary happens or they get extraordinarily lucky, is that they're going to go to another animal or lower rebirth after this life. And this is what the teachings say, right? In fact, the teachings specifically say it may occur to you where you go, oh, well, you fall to the lower realms, you burn up a bunch of bad karma, and then you pop right back up again, right? No. In the lower realms, you almost continuously accumulate further negative karma. Almost continuously, you rack up more negative deeds, and then you fall into a further state of rebirth that is oftentimes even less favorable than whatever you were just experiencing. At some point, perhaps you do bottom out and you get to some experience that is so horrific that it may be called hell. And that goes on for quite some time, and then you emerge from that and take rebirth in some upper realm again as a human being, or maybe as an animal, or whatever the case may be. But in general, it's a flowchart downward. It's sort of like a person that's on a steep hill, right? As long as they don't trip while they're walking, everything's going to be fine. But if they trip and start to fall, odds are that as they fall on this steep hill, they're going to keep gaining momentum until they hit the bottom. That's the point. And that's really what the Buddhist cosmological model says, is that if you don't take proper advantage of this opportunity, it's extremely difficult to find another one. And the Buddha uses the analogy here of if you took the ring that an oxen would put on to pull a plow through a field, right? I can't remember what it's called, a yoke, right? But if you took that ring, and it's made of wood at his time, he said if you threw it onto one of the 7 great oceans, and he said at the bottom of one of these oceans that are all connected, right? At the bottom of one of these oceans, there's a turtle that's either blind or half blind, depending on which version of the story you read. And he comes up for air once every 100 years. He said, basically he goes, monks, what is the likelihood that this turtle would put his head through this yoke that just happens to be floating somewhere on the 7 oceans? And the monks go, it seems impossible. Right. What is this yoke? This yoke, he says, is the opportunity that you've already found. The opportunity where you don't have the wrong views, you don't have the mind or body that is so deformed or screwed up in some way that you can't do the practice, that you're born into a place where you have access to the teachings, and you're born at a time where the teachings exist. That these conditions are so rare that it's like a turtle who's blind or half blind accidentally putting his head through a yoke that's floating on the ocean. Why? Because again and again and again, you do negative deeds, you have incredible habits to do the wrong thing, and those habits, like a person standing at the top of a steep hill, tend to gain momentum and throw you back down again and again and again. So the odds that by accident, that when you came up this time, you put your head through the hole are just astronomical odds. I did some calculations on this once because there are a bunch of other analogies in the suttas, and you can actually do some math. And the odds of getting this rebirth, according to the suttas, are way, way, way better than the odds of winning the lottery 2 or 3 times in a row. Most of us would never expect to win the lottery once. Getting this rebirth, it's like finding the golden ticket. It is thinking that you're absolutely poor, that you have no money, that you're probably not going to make it, and then finding out that actually all along, some rich relative you never heard of left you like $1 billion in a trust fund, and everything's going to be fine. You've already hit the jackpot, is the point. Problem is, if you don't make use of it properly, then the odds that you're going to get it again are extremely low. Lama Tsongkhapa says, the time between rebirths like this one is so long that you might as well say never again. I'll never get this chance again. Because for you, it's so long that by the time you get there, this what you did now basically won't matter. Right? Which is why he says this precious freedom human rebirth is found only once. Right? It's sort of an allusion, I think, to that teaching. So this teaching is meant to give you this powerful motivation when you contemplate all these points over and over and over again from different angles, and you chew it up and try to bring in things that really move your mind. It's meant to create a motivation day and night, as though you've lost a precious loved one, or as though you've fallen madly in love with someone, that is there day and night when you're dreaming, when you're awake, when you're half awake, when you're taking a bath, when it doesn't matter what you're doing, right? That this motivation is always there. I need to take advantage of this precious opportunity while it's here, right? Okay, what's the second point? The second point intensifies the first. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So this is where Atisha's Lamrim starts. He starts with impermanence. This is where quite often Zen will start you. If you're taking Zen quite seriously, they start you with impermanence. I can't remember which tradition of Zen it is, but there's many a funny story. I say funny, but, Buddhist humor. There's many a funny story where in a Zen monastery, a novice monk joins, and they say, okay, as part of your sort of initiation into the monastery, we want to give you some taste of impermanence so that you're properly motivated to do all the training while you're here. And they say, okay, yes, no problem. And so they would tie a rope around the chest or waist of that person, and they would hang them, like if there's a cliff here, right? They would hang them over the cliff by the rope so that they're looking like this, and then there would be monks standing here holding the rope and, making sure the person doesn't fall, right? So they're all holding on. And then at some point, somebody in the line would go, oh God, I dropped him. And they would all let the rope drop by like 5 feet. So the person would fall and have the feeling that, oh, this is it. This is the end of my life. It all came to this. And then, boom. And then it wasn't the end, right? And then they got caught. Oh, why? Because they want to give this person a direct experience that any moment could be the last. Any moment, this life could be over. Any moment, your heart could suddenly give out. Any moment, an aneurysm could go. Any moment, your kidneys, because of some undiagnosed genetic disorder, could stop functioning and kill you. Any moment, some internal condition could make this body stop, or some external condition could make this body stop functioning. And then it's the end. So, this is expressed in brief by saying this life is as impermanent as a water bubble. In Buddhism, time is infinite. It goes infinitely into the past, and it will continue infinitely into the future. The future doesn't exist yet, but there is no end to time. So when you look at the duration of this life as maybe 80 years if you're lucky, right? It's like a bubble that forms in water. You're doing the dishes, you have the pot there, and the water goes in, it pulls a little air down with it, and the bubble comes up and it goes boom, right away, right? The bubble goes down, it comes up, it hits the surface, boom, and it's gone. Just like that. Just like that. When you compare this human life to infinite lives in the past and the lives that are coming, infinite lives in the future, this one is like a water bubble, like a flash of lightning, like a drop of dew in the morning. All these kinds of analogies. It's also like a water bubble because a water bubble is so fragile. Just a small touch anywhere and it will go. And in the same way, this body can, I mean, you can get like a mosquito bite and get an infection and get sepsis and die. It doesn't actually take much to pop this bubble. You can eat the wrong food and it just like nicks your intestine somewhere, and because of stress and this and that and blah blah blah, the intestine becomes infected and stops functioning properly and you die. These sorts of things can happen so quickly. And then what happens? You lose this precious opportunity, so difficult to find, and it will be difficult to find again, right? So you can see how the preciousness is sort of mostly sort of the happy side of the picture. You've got this great opportunity. And the impermanence is sort of like the sobering side, right? You have this great opportunity, but it's not going to be here for long, and you need to make use of it. Because right after death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So if you want to use this rebirth to gain a better rebirth, you can. If you want to use this rebirth to gain nirvana, you can. If you want to use this rebirth to gain unsurpassed, full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings, you can. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me to always be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and to accomplish all virtuous deeds. So because karma is definite, there's no way to escape the results of karma. There's a lot of work you can do to clean up the negative deeds you've done in the past. But unless you do that work, the karma will ripen at some point. It's like a seed sitting in the soil. Recently, a seed was discovered from 32,000 years ago, and they planted it in the appropriate conditions in a laboratory, and the seed grew into a flower from 32,000 years ago. And just like that, the results of black and white karma are planted in your mind, and unlike seeds here in physical reality, these seeds of your previous actions, these imprints, these mental imprints from your previous actions, they will wait there until the appropriate conditions occur, and then they ripen. And they ripen into new rebirths, new bodies, new experiences with other beings, and most importantly, the drive to do certain things, right? So most of us, of course, have had the experience that you go to the grocery store and you look around at a bunch of food there, right? And some of that food, for some reason, looks really great. And other foods there, for some reason, look really disgusting. Don't know why. Maybe in some cases we have some idea why, but in a lot of cases you just look at it and you go, yeah, I really like that one. I want that. In other cases you go, oh no, that's gross. That's too weird for me. That's not, and we don't know why. So we have these instinctual drives to do some action and to carry that action through to completion, sometimes really horrible stuff, and in the other way, to do good things and to see them all the way through to completion, right? That's the most important aspect of karma. Why? Because that's the part that causes you to do it again. And that's the part that you're really working on here in real time. This is the part where you can interfere with the ongoing process of death and rebirth. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. By the way, if you can get all these impulses under control, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be so nice to not be constantly blown around by a bunch of likes and dislikes that you didn't even deliberately put there in the first place? And to be able to make crystal clear decisions all the time in a state of joyful awareness, and to be able to accomplish whatever you put your mind to. This is what we're talking about. The reason you can't do that is because you have these seeds of mental predispositions from the past that cause you to get frustrated, to quit, to chase after bullshit that doesn't do anything, to try to get rid of other bullshit that also doesn't help by getting rid of that stuff, blah, blah, blah. So this is why we're trying to abandon even the slightest negativities and to accomplish all virtues, so that we are reversing the momentum of this entire process of habituated tendency. So in the first place, we're trying to make the mind a much better sort of workshop to do the work in by just planting a whole bunch of really good habits: generosity, ethics, patience, perseverance, all of these predispositions that make doing the work quite easy. So all of that work comes before concentration. Concentration comes after doing that work, or they're kind of all coming up together, right? At a minimum, you could say that as your concentration gets a little better, perseverance, the patience, this, right? So you can maybe bring them up all together, but you need to bring up all of these things that are basically your behavior in order to bring the concentration up. These aren't separable things. That's the point. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong bliss for the wish of liberation. So here he's discussing the 3 types of practitioners, or the 3 scopes of practice. So the first scope of practice is just trying to basically overcome the terrible karmic situation in which we find ourselves, i.e., you want to gain a better rebirth. At a minimum, yeah? This set of motivations shares in common with the desire to attain liberation. That's a really crazy way of saying it. Way too many qualifications. Okay. If you want to attain a better rebirth, that motivation shares some things in common with the motivation to attain liberation. In particular, your focus has moved beyond this lifetime, this single lifetime. If you just want a better rebirth, or another one like this one, your primary focus shifts slowly over the course of time, shifts from just doing things for the sake of this lifetime alone towards doing things so that you can have at least this good of a condition in your next life, right? That becomes your primary motivation rather than just doing selfish stuff in this life. You become sort of long-term selfish. I'm going to do selfish things for my next life. Now, the desire to attain liberation is also beyond this lifetime. And it's also still slightly selfish. But how does it differ? It differs because now you don't want to take rebirth at all. Seeking samsaric pleasures, i.e. looking for just a better rebirth, right, which is the first scope of practice. We all need to develop that motivation. But all of these states of rebirth, they're not reliable. They will change. Even if you take rebirth as the highest God in the highest heaven and the highest formless state of concentration, it's temporary. Every state of concentration is just a habit. And when the habit runs out, the rebirth runs out. So they're uncertain and they can't be relied upon. This is a major shortcoming, yeah? So if your only goal is just to have a better rebirth, there's a huge drawback there, which is that you may screw it up next time and end up in a lower rebirth, and you may have one more nice one, but in that one you screw it up, and then you fall right back down into the cycle. Or you have a good one, and then right after that one you have a really bad one, right? It's all uncertain. It's all unreliable. So contemplating all sorts of reasons like these, then you develop the bliss for liberation, the desire for the bliss of liberation, i.e., I don't want to be reborn anywhere. I want to attain a state of perfect satisfaction that doesn't rely upon rebirth. Then, led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. So This state of mind here is called renunciation. It is the first principal path of actual Buddhist training. You can still be Buddhist if all you want is a better rebirth, or even if you don't want a better rebirth. You can be Buddhist just because you think the Buddha is a valid authority, you think he's a good person to listen to, you think that there are beings who have gained realization by doing the training that he laid out. That qualifies you as Buddhist. However, to be on the path of Buddhism, which is why this is called the first principal path, you need to have a motivation that leads to one of the final results of Buddhist training. I hope this distinction makes sense. So one of the final results of Buddhist training is nirvana. So when you have a legitimate motivation with all of the right ingredients, like we've just been discussing, to attain nirvana, then the karma that you're creating is throwing you towards nirvana. If you were to train in concentration without renunciation, then the karma that you're creating has momentum that's throwing you towards the formless realms or the form realms. So it's not even on the path yet. I hope this is sinking in for a few people. So the motivation for the concentration training needs to be aimed at the right thing. This is a tool I'm cultivating to get the hell out of samsara. I don't ever want to take rebirth again. To accomplish that, I have to have the concentration. You see it? Based upon that motivation to get the hell out of samsara, renunciation, or I like the term disenchantment. You're no longer enchanted by the trappings of taking rebirth in better circumstances. Mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. I'm fairly certain great caution here is a translation of conscientiousness, but I'm not 100% sure. And conscientiousness is basically an internal sense. It's almost like dignity, right? It's a sense that I'm not going to do negative things because basically because I find them wrong, to put it in brief, right? It doesn't matter if somebody else agrees, doesn't matter if anybody finds out. I'm going to do it because I have dignity, right? That's it. I'm going to do it because it's the right thing. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters about the equation. So, in particular, mindfulness and alertness arise. Now, I'm not going to jump topics here, but if we jump down, right? Just look on the sidebar here. Hopefully you can read this. When we start talking about developing flawless concentration, when we start talking about developing samadhi, or shamatha, calm abiding, whatever term, the two mental factors that we need to accomplish calm abiding are recollection, which is another way of translating mindfulness, and we need vigilance, which is another way of translating alertness, right? So based upon the renunciation, you start to go, I have to have the concentration or I can't get out of this mess. So I'm going to get the concentration no matter what it takes. Because you have this powerful motivation, day and night, I have to get out of this circumstance, right? And I can't get out of it by just flipping switches and turning knobs and changing jobs and changing wives or husbands or getting rid of this or getting rid of that or getting this or getting that. I have to go into the mind and do the work. To get into the mind and do the work, I need the concentration. To get the concentration, I need mindfulness and I need alertness. And these two mental factors, which we will discuss at length, we will discuss these terms at great depth, are the two mental factors that work together along with intent and motive to create or to cause a state of samadhi, to cause a state of calm abiding. And then he goes further. The root of the teachings is keeping the pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Right? So the pratimoksha vows are 5 vows. 5 vows. Pratimoksha means self-liberation or individual liberation. And so there are 5 vows that you take that specifically sort of help you move in the direction of gaining liberation. And those 5 vows are not to kill, not to steal, not to commit sexual misconduct, not to lie, and not to consume intoxicants. And this last one has a couple different interpretations. The version that I took is basically don't even take a single drop and put it on your tongue. The Buddha said this in the one of the Vinaya texts, if I'm not mistaken, that one of his monks had never tasted alcohol. He took a blade of grass and dipped it into a beer or something, and he put it on his tongue just to taste it, and the Buddha kicked him out of the Sangha. Now, some interpretations of the do not drink or do not consume intoxicants rule say do not become intoxicated. In other words, you can have like a glass of beer, but don't become intoxicated to the point where you lose your mindfulness and vigilance. In other words, where you lose your sort of self-awareness and do things you wouldn't normally do. So that is one interpretation. I tend to agree with the total abstinence, the total avoidance, for numerous reasons. The biggest reason is karmic, right? For most people, the reason that you're taking a drink is to try to fix some type of internal state that you don't like, right? You're taking a drink to feel better. Isn't that right? You're drinking because you don't like how you feel. You want to forget how you feel. You want to forget what you were thinking. You want to forget some pain in your body. You want to forget some circumstance that's going on. And you want to make yourself more loose. So karmically, what are you doing? You're setting up a predisposition in your mind to look to the outside, to substances that can be consumed in order to forget, to make the mind slightly more sloppy, to make the discernment slightly less. And it seems to me that the karmic pathway of that is not a good one. That tendency, in the end, is not a tendency that you want to reinforce, which would make sense of why the Buddha said, if you put 1 drop of alcohol on your tongue, you're out of my Sangha. But I digress. He then goes on to discuss bodhicitta, and he goes on to say, okay, now you've actually realized concentration, you've gained calm abiding. Now, please bless me to combine this with training in analytic meditation so that I can combine calm abiding and analytic meditation. Then, which means realizing emptiness directly. And then, having done that, having gained a realization of emptiness in the general path, i.e. using the sutra method, which is what we're describing here in this set of notes, he said, then please bless me to enter the Vajra vehicle. Because using the Vajra vehicle, you can progress much more quickly. For example, if you attain a direct realization of emptiness on the sutra path, using the normal bodhisattva path and the normal sort of bodhisattva bhumi, bodhisattva level system, according to that system, it will take you 3 mahakalpas to attain awakening after that first taste of emptiness. Now, of course, your mind is quite nice. You've already realized emptiness. Things are going quite nice. There's still some work to do, but you're in good shape. And things are getting better all the time. However, a mahakalpa is The Buddha said, he said, if there was a block of stone that was 9 yojans tall, 9 yojans wide, 9 yojans long, so a cube, a massive cube, and I can't remember how many miles a yojan is. I think it's like 7 miles or 8 miles, right? So this is a very, very large object. And he said, if a person were to come with a silk cloth and to rub it once every 100 years, he said a kalpa, a normal kalpa, not a mahakalpa, but just one kalpa is longer than the time it would take for that stone to completely disappear. And I did the math on this once, and it's like billions of lifetimes, right? So you would need to come back billions of times as a human being, continue deepening your realization of emptiness in order to get to nirvana, and then billions of more lifetimes to perfect the realization of omniscience and attain Buddhahood. In the Vajra path, rather than using the samadhis, the form realm samadhis and the formless realm samadhis to progressively remove subtler and subtler states of emptiness, what you use is one or more of the extremely subtle states of consciousness that naturally occur during the death and the dying and death process. And you use those to realize emptiness. So there are a series of techniques where you sort of trigger these minds that would normally only be triggered during the dying and rebirth process. And these are extremely, extremely subtle or foundational types of minds, types of consciousness. They're not just concentration games. These are fundamental elements of your concentrative, or of your being, right? And you trigger these extremely subtle states of mind, and then you use those to realize emptiness. And so when you look at how long the path of training takes on the Vajra vehicle, using those sorts of methods, when you realize emptiness for the very first time directly in meditation, using clear light mind, the subtlest mind there is, the very first time you taste emptiness directly with that mind, you already attain the arhatship or the nirvana that would have taken you billions upon billions of lifetimes to attain on the normal bodhisattva path. So it is just absurdly fast. For a person of great capability, in a single lifetime, they can do the work of billions of lifetimes, billions and billions and billions of lifetimes, just in that one lifetime. For a person of sort of medium capability, 3 to 7 lifetimes. For a person who's a little slow and stubborn and doesn't really want to work that hard, 16 lifetimes, maybe 17. So when you compare that against billions of lifetimes, this is a very, very fast approach. And so he says, having already realized emptiness in the normal way, using sort of the sutric method, may I then quickly enter into the Vajra vehicle and then use the Vajra method, right? In order to accomplish the Vajra method, I need to keep the vows and the commitments to my teachers that are associated with that method. Having realized the importance of the 2 stages of the Vajra method, may I practice those stages with great energy and realize what my mentor is teaching me on the path. And then he does a short dedication. In all my lives, never separated from perfect mentors, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma by completing the qualities of the stages and path. May I quickly attain the stage of Vajradhara, which is the sort of one of the tantric versions of full enlightenment. So we went a bit further, talking a little bit about bodhicitta, a bit about the tantric thing. But the bigger point is there are tools in the Lamrim for developing these powerful motivations, right? First, a motivation to just attain a better rebirth. Now, if you want to attain a better rebirth in the form realm or formless realm, you need the concentration. So that by itself, if you make it powerful enough by thinking the reasons over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? The motivation will grow and grow and grow until it's so powerful that it's like falling in love, or it's like losing a loved one, where the motivation is there all the time. But it comes slowly, 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 slowly. You don't have to fake something. You don't have to pretend, oh, I want a better rebirth now. No. You just contemplate the reasons, you study, you contemplate the reasons again, you do some practice, you get a little experience, you contemplate the reasons, and it grows. And you become more like that. And so, as I said to somebody recently, I know of people who started out with 5 minutes a day, kind of spotty, 20 years ago, and they gained a little experience, did some study, thought about it, did more study, did more practice, did more study, did more practice. And at this point, today, now, they study 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day, usually at a minimum, and do somewhere between 4 and 6 hours of practice a day, right? And it's not because they're like contriving to try to do more practice and they're contriving to try to do more study. They have just genuinely reshaped their motivation over a long period of time by thinking about the right shit and by gaining the right experiences by applying the instructions over and over and over again. And so the motivation grows. As the motivation naturally grows, the effort grows. As the effort grows, you do more. As you do more, you taste more. As you taste more, you go, whoa, what the text said is absolutely correct. And the motivation grows, right? So now you can see we're coming full circle where you're going, okay, I've thought about the benefits of concentration. I've thought about how great this opportunity is. I've thought about how terrible it would be if I wasted the opportunity. And now you're looking at Maitreya's method. Oh, wow, yeah, you keep going through the path. You taste little pieces of the path. You get more motivation having tasted those pieces. And then you're looking at the Lamrim approach, which in some ways brings these all together in my mind. And you're going, oh, by thinking about each step and stage of the different scopes of practitioners, just wanting a better rebirth, or just wanting liberation for myself, or wanting to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings, you can see how you can start using these motivations once they've been built to train in concentration, to train in calm abiding. So that sums it up for today. Next week, we're going to be talking about advanced intentions for training in meditation. To me, I may actually change the name of this section to the result intention, the final intentions. These are the intentions that you find in Zen, for example. You find them in tantric training. You find them in some brands of Taoist training from what I've seen. I'm sure that you find them in other places as well. Even I've encountered some Kundalini practitioners who have basically talked in this way about the motivation for their training. So this is a quite exciting topic, but what I'd like to say in brief is these types of really advanced intentions and ways of kind of organizing your mind for practice grow out of, in my opinion, these earlier types of training. In other words, you need to start with where you are. Right now, you're probably a normal person who's mostly thinking about this lifetime, mostly thinking about themselves. And so it really helps to go, wow, I don't want to end up in a really shitty rebirth. I'm going to do some stuff so that doesn't happen. I really want to be happy. I'm going to make sure that more and more I'm aiming my intention and motivation at doing the right stuff for me to accomplish a state of stable internal peace, and happiness, right? And then you go, oh, you know what? Everyone's exactly like me in this regard. Everybody wants this happiness. Not only that, but rebirth is unlimited, infinite. Everyone has been my mother. Everyone has been my father. Everyone has been my mentor. Everyone has been extraordinarily kind to me in the past. I need to repay this kindness by attaining full awakening so that I can be of benefit to each being exactly according to their needs. And then, having gotten this far, right, having produced these extremely powerful motivations that have gotten you way down the path of training, then you affect the final intent, the final level of intention, which we'll discuss next week. Actually, maybe not next week, maybe 2 weeks, we shall see. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, if you'd like to contribute to the work going on here on the channel, I do have a Patreon in the links below. The money from that goes only towards texts that are related to my PhD research in Buddhism, or towards supporting my personal practice, or towards making donations to Buddhist causes. If you're not inclined to support, that's okay. The intent of this channel, as usual, is simply to support you in really getting the most out of whatever Buddhist tradition you're already studying. My advice is not to treat me as a teacher. My advice is to find a proper mentor in Buddhism, right? And then I'm kind of over here on the side giving you a bit of advice as sort of an older brother to just help you get the most out of one of these real robust lineages and sets of teachings that are already out there. That's the idea. Thank you for tuning in, and see you very soon.